Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Midweek Program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum. And today we are in Mark's office because it is chucking it down outside right now, but that's okay. We've got a program planned for you. Our director, Mark, here is going to be talking about how to protect pollinators while you're managing your pests. This is a useful topic we all have questions about for sure. Yeah. And so we're going to explore that today on our program. So it should be absolutely wonderful. Those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Mark to teach us how to protect our pollinators while we're managing our pests.
All right, thank you very much. Those who join us pretty often know I typically freewheel it on these things and kind of go stream of consciousness. And I was thinking about that with this and realized there's a lot I want to mention. And in my head, I kept jumping from thing to thing, ADD kind of, which is a real,
It's a real thing.
It's a thing.
I think it's helpful for plant people because it's just like plants are always, they're always there. They're always something to look at. It's just something beautiful. I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I decided this time I'm going to organize my thoughts, which I don't always do. So, people have always loved, well, I don't know if always love pollinators, but it's a big concern with a lot of people now, what are happening to pollinators. There's a lot of stories about the monarch butterflies, about honeybees, which are really struggling, and increasingly more and more information about our native bees. There's something on the order of 4,000 bees native to North America, probably a lot more that have not been described yet. And then there are other pollinators. There are some beetles that do a little bit of pollination, and bats that can do some pollination, and various other flies and solitary wasps and things like that. You'll hear me say bee a lot because bees, and along with them, those solitary wasps, the non-stinging kinds, are the ones that are doing the bulk of the pollination out there. There's a lot of reasons for the decline of the pollinators. There's loss of habitat. There's the use of pesticides. There's some disease and insects that are hitting them, and changing climate especially for our native ones as things, there's some bees, the blueberry bee, which nests in the ground, comes out, pollinates blueberries, our native blueberries, when they flower, and then pretty much goes back underground for the next year. There's a little bit of breeding going on in between there, but if those blueberries start blooming earlier and earlier, there's a question whether these blueberry bees will pick up on the same environmental cues, because plants flower generally either because of the length of the day or because of changes in temperature. Different plants do different things. And, if it could be that a blueberry has evolved to, and I don't know, I should have looked this up. I don't know if it blooms day length, or I think it's a temperature related thing, but if the bee was more related to day length, which was how it was getting its cues, those could have evolved to overlap. And if temperatures change, could be. So, and there are other factors in there as well. A lot of unhealthy bees because the honeybees, because of large scale farming, people ship their honeybee hives around because most of our food crops need bee pollination. And so, if you take bee hives out to the almond groves in California, and the almonds are flowering for several weeks, those bees have one nectar source for a matter of weeks. And then they're loaded onto trucks and brought to, I don't know what, maybe strawberries or peaches. And so they go through these series so that's not very, very healthy. But we love beautiful gardens, and, we want to protect those pollinators, but, we also don't necessarily want all the little pests and things eating our plants. So, it's easy to say, well, don't spray. And there are a lot of people who say that, and that's fine. I don't spray for pests at my house, partially because I think it's better to not, but more because I can't stand doing it. It's gross. It usually smells bad. It takes up time. I'd rather be doing something else. I will spray occasionally for weeds, but mostly I have to pull weeds by hand. But really, I don't spray in my garden. But I don't have a problem if other people do. And I'm going to use another thing. I'm going to use the word spray a lot. I'm meaning that to treat. Just in general to treat. Now we'll have some differences in sprays versus powders and things like that as we go along. But when I say spray, just think in terms of treating for pests. Perhaps the first thing we should talk about when we talk about pests and pesticides, a pesticide is a chemical that kills a pest. Pests are insects, mites, fungi,
Mammals?
plants, mammals, kings, that's regicide, You don't find that on the shelf at Home Depot. And mostly I'm going to be talking about insecticides because our pollinators are insects for the most part. But in kind of order, the insecticides in general are going to be worse for your pollinators than anything else. And then the miticides. Miticides kill mites and their relatives, which are the 8-legged critters like spiders and mites instead of the 6-legged critters like insects. But those are very relatively closely related. And then fungicides. Some of those can harm insects, some not. In general, fungicides are some of the worst for us. We are actually, in the grand scheme of evolutionary time, we're not too far away from fungi, as opposed to some really insects. Even some of the fungicides are worse. So, for the pollinator, and then herbicides, and herbicides can be damaging to insects. It's a chemical that's killing a plant, and it can be a problem. The original chemical in Roundup, glyphosate, which most Roundup doesn't even have glyphosate in it anymore, but that's considered moderately toxic to pollinators. So, when I'm saying pesticides, think insecticides while I'm talking about this. I mentioned I don't spray in my garden. When you're deciding whether to spray, you should never be like, I need anything that is a pest dead and gone. Eradication should never be the goal. It isn't the goal with people who are professionals who are producing fruits or vegetables as a goal. You use what's called integrated pest management. And the first step of integrated pest management is to have a threshold. That may be aesthetic threshold, like I don't grow vegetables and I'm looking in my garden, and when it looks too bad, maybe I'll have to treat. It never really does for me. My aesthetic threshold's pretty low or high, whichever one, I'm not sure. It could also be for the health of the plant, the threshold for your treatment. And then the other parts of integrated pest management include things like scouting early and often. So if you go out and you see some aphids starting to appear on your milkweed, they're real easy to see, they're bright orange. You can go out with a hose with pretty high pressure and you can blast them off of your plants. Now it gets much harder when there's a huge population of them. Then they get down in the crevices of the leaves and things like that, and it's harder to get rid of them. You get rid of a lot of them, but there's still some there. So if you're early on and you see these things, you can often treat them with non-chemical means. Bagworms you can pull off by hand. Fall webworms and tent caterpillars. You know why they have those little tents? Mostly, there's a little bit about warmth, especially fall webworms, because it can be cold nights. They get in those little webby tents all together and it keeps warm, but it also keeps birds from eating them. So if you just go out with a stick and you break open those little tents, you're feeding the birds, and they won't necessarily eat every one of them, but it will reduce the populations. And you have to do that multiple times and, do that, during the day when the birds are out and hunting and it'll really help. So, that's the next part of integrated pest management. You have to know, kind of unspoken is you have to know what you're looking at. Know what is a pest, know what isn't a pest, know what is a beneficial insect, know what pests are probably not going to cause much of a problem for you at all, or that are real bad and then drop off completely, and you may be more able to tolerate them. But the number of people who kill their beneficials is a real problem, because those get things kind of in equilibrium if we let them go a little bit.
Yeah, and knowing the pest is step number one. I mean, you look at the larval stage of a ladybug. If you don't know what that is, you're like, what is this freaky thing? Like, I need to eradicate it. But it's like, oh wait, no, this is the larval stage of a ladybug. It's going to turn into a ladybug, and actually, while it's in that larval stage, it's going to be shoving aphids in its face, fattening up like crazy. And you don't want to be getting rid of that one.
Right, and if you look on your milkweed and you have that larval ladybug, and you have those bright orange, kind of pretty aphids on there.
Pretty.
The ladybug looks like a pest. I mean, it's a kind of an evil looking thing. It doesn't look anything like a ladybug. So know what your pests are and what you're doing, and understand that pests and beneficials. We like our tiger swallowtail larvae, caterpillars, and our monarch butterfly caterpillars, but we don't like fall webworms and tent caterpillars. So when we're going to treat, if you're treating caterpillars with something, it's going to be treating, i.e. killing all caterpillars. So our chemicals are not terribly selective. But so going starting with not treating. Starting from there, there are things you can do. I am not a vegetable gardener. I don't want to give a whole lot of advice about vegetable gardens. But one thing that I know is helpful from when I was a kid and from when I visited vegetable gardens, especially at botanic gardens, where they're often trying to show people ways to do things, is, say, your bean beetles, which can really do a number on your plants. Bean beetles, when they come through, they don't move a lot from plant to plant to plant to plant. So if you plant out beans, a sacrificial row of beans, 2 weeks or so earlier than your other beans, those bigger, healthier plant will bring in the bean beetles, and they will skeletonize all of them, and your other crops are basically protected. You don't even have to treat them. They will just eat there, and then they go do their thing and make new little bean beetles and things like that.
Yeah. In integrated pest management, the concept is called a trap crop.
A trap crop, exactly.
Yeah.
See, trap crop.
There it is, trap crops.
We're reading each other's minds, man. We're both here. One of the things that I harp on, I've probably talked in these videos before about, I always tell people is, if you have a plant that always gets a disease, you have a dogwood, and it always gets powdery mildew. You got, whatever, that always has a problem. Get rid of it. There are so many plants. We grow 8,000 different plants here at the Arboretum, and the only reason we don't grow more is because we run out of space. We have to cut things down in order to plant more things. There's so many plants out there. Why grow a plant that's just constantly a problem? If you have to spray something every year, unless you are completely committed to it, like a rose grower, get rid of it. I mean, when you say, oh, but it's a lot of work to cut it down, or I'll have to pay somebody to come and haul it off and cut it, you're buying those chemicals every year. Just, And I'm not. You don't ask me what to replace it with, because that's the wrong question. It's what 10 things to replace it with. Diversity. If you have a diverse garden, you have less problem with pests. The less diversity in your garden, and then in your neighbors and your neighbors and your neighborhoods, if you're all having the same things, you have more problems. That's the pests move from one to another plant to another, because they've got, like what's in your yard, it's the same thing in your neighbors, the same thing in your neighbors. They just move around, and they are real happy, and they breed a lot, and you get more and more, and then you wind up all of them dying, and then what happens? The nurserymen and the landscapers come here and say, "What's the replacement for this plant?" No, not the replacement.
Yeah.
The 50 replacements.
For sure. Because fundamentally, this is a question of ecological balance. Like
Exactly.
You've got one species of organism whose population has just exploded, that it's become a problem for other species of organisms. As you diversify your landscape, it makes that balance a lot easier to be struck, basically.
Exactly. Keep your plants healthy. That's an obvious one. But people don't understand what keeping your plants healthy means. Over-fertilized plants are something that pests love.
Yes.
They love those over-fertilized plants, and over-fertilization causes other problems as those fertilizers run off on days like this. Overwatering. If you overwater deeply, you can cause root rot problems, which that is a pest in itself, the root rot. But also you make the plants, you stress them, they're more susceptible to insects. You say, well, I don't water too deeply. Well, do you water often and shallow? If you do that, you have plants with a shallow root system. And boy, you don't water one time, and all of a sudden they're stressed. And when plants are stressed, they send signals out, and the insects come. Because as this is a little bit anthropomorphizing plants, but the goal is to reproduce. And when a plant is stressed and the insects come to it, they're not going to a healthy individual. Species survival kind of a thing. I used to always say I don't water my home garden. I do water some now. But when I water, I put a sprinkler on 3 hours. I water. I don't do it often, but if I'm going to put a sprinkler on, the water is soaking in and getting down to those roots. And the drier it's been, the more important it is to do that, because water will hit that dry soil and sheet off until it starts really percolating down.
Yeah, and if we're talking about root rots, like if you're watering constantly, then the roots are going to stay wet all the time. Whereas if you're doing a deep water and then you allow it to dry out, and then a deep water and you allow it to dry out, you can interrupt the life cycle of that fungus. Those dry periods, the fungus isn't going to live through that. So you're shooting yourself in the foot by watering too frequently, making an environment perfect for these fungus that are killing your plants.
And watering deeply encourages roots to go down. If you water shallow, there's no reason. I mean, it's less work for less energy spent for the roots to stay very shallow. So that doesn't matter whether it's a shallow rooted tree like a maple or deep rooted tree like an oak. Watering deeply will encourage the roots to go down. Now, a maple, a shallowly rooted plant, won't go as deep as an oak, but in general, even an oak, 90% or more of the roots are in the top foot of soil.
Yes.
But it can be the top 6 inches if you water poorly.
For sure.
So you water deep, you get the roots deeper down, the feeder roots. We're not so much talking about structural roots, but the feeder roots deeper down. And then if you don't water during a drought, that plant is much, much more able to survive that, because it's going down deep. All right, we're going to go to if you must treat. And I'll say here, the greenhouses, we have to treat some. That's a very specific environment. And we'd love to use beneficials in the greenhouses more, except we're not like a nursery where we're growing plants for longer or have bigger crops where one type of beneficial is very good. Since we're always going through it, makes it really pretty difficult to get that ecological balance that you talk about. But in the garden, we really try not to. We treat fire ants. We'll spray wasp nests. especially when they're around the kids' yurt or where people get married. And if we have an issue, we will spot treat it. We will deal with it. The biggest issue in the 18 years I've been here is one year we had a terrible outbreak of lace bug on our azaleas and rhododendrons in the lath house. And it was just for whatever reason that population really peaked that one year. And we did treat, and this was a case of not scouting regularly, not scouting well enough, because once those lace bugs are there, they make all the leaves look ugly, all stippled and kind of brown. And the leaves are like that once you kill the lace bugs. They're, especially on the evergreen species, you're stuck with kind of ugly looking leaves for 2-3 years until those leaves drop. So that's one where if we had noticed the population really growing early and treated earlier, it would have been better for us. Really, by the time we got to it, we probably should have just let it go, because the population probably would have crashed. So you're going to spray something, any chemical that you're going to spray in your garden outside. There's some general rules that will help you protect pollinators. If you're going to spray, it's best to do it in the evening, ideally right around dusk. Bees generally start around sunup, and they build up slowly until later afternoon, and then by about an hour after sunset, they're done. Honeybees, things are done. Unless it's really hot and it's relatively bright out, they may continue on. So do it if you can't do it in the evenings, do it early morning. But really your better bet is in the evening. Avoid spraying when you know it's going to rain. One, that washes things off and it's less effective. But also it moves those chemicals, and avoid spraying near water. Water features, whether they're man-made or natural. We're talking about toxicity to bees and other pollinators, but water, invertebrates that live in the water, and fish and amphibians, chemicals, even ones that are very safe for bees, have a tendency to be very, very toxic to these waterborne animals. It really is a tough thing. I think it's a lot of these creatures take in more things.
Oh, sure.
Permeably.
Yeah, especially amphibians.
They're
super susceptible for that very reason, because they can just absorb it right through their skin as soon as it touches.
I have a lot of newts in my garden.
Do you?
Yeah. I feel guilty in the winter when I'm doing something and I move a bunch of leaves and there's a newt there. I'm like, put the leaf back on.
Fair enough.
But yeah, the chemicals can move through the water. And many chemicals, when they will bind very tightly to, say, soil.
Sure.
And so not move as well. But they will move if there's enough moisture in the water, or they get into water streams. You mix a lot of these chemicals with water to spray, so they can last longer, even things that would typically not last long in the environment. Never spray plants that are in flower. Don't do it.
Yeah.
The pollinators go to the flowers. So if you must pollinate if you must treat something that is in flower that you're spraying over it, ideally don't spray it even avoiding the flowers, because you get these pollinators will alight on the plant and they can pick it up that way. Cut off the flowers. You're going to treat it, go ahead and cut off the flowers and treat it.
Yeah.
Remember, whether it's under your plants that you're spraying or it's in your lawn, that while we don't think of weeds as flowers, they're all things we don't like. Those flowers on those weeds are heavily used by pollinators.
No kidding.
Pollinators, a lot of those. If your lawn has dandelions and clover, pollinators are using those nectar sources. So if you've got to spray your lawn, go through and mow it beforehand and get rid of as many of those flowers as you can, because you're killing honeybees when you spray that clover in flower. And that's with an herbicide as well, because a lot of these herbicides can cause damage to bees. But keep that in mind. Those weeds that you're going to get to one of these days that are in flower, even little tiny flowers, you're getting a lot of your little native solitary bees if you're spraying those in flower, or if you're spraying a rose with no flowers, but there's these weeds underneath it.
Sure.
You were spraying those weeds.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this before, spot spray. If you've got a problem, take care of that problem. Don't say, well, I've got this problem, I better protect my whole garden from it, because not all pests, but many insect pests are relatively specific to the plant that they're going to. They may hit multiple different plants, but they're also skipping over a bunch of things. And so don't just blanket spray.
One thing Greg says a lot is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think that that's going to go through this whole topic, where if you're keeping on top of things, that's preventing you from having to bring in the nuclear option at the end. Like, you can keep things manageable to where you can actually get it out with your hands even, so
and that goes back to the not spraying a bit, leaf roller caterpillars in cannas. Oh man, they make them look ugly. They're terrible. You start getting those, cut all your cannas back, get rid of the tops.
Yeah.
If you got a little fish pond, you can unroll the leaves
For
and
sure.
throw them in there and feed your fish. And then water and, do a little bit of fertilization, and boom, they pop back up and they'll flower. And you can cut them back like that a couple of times, and all it'll do is keep that huge patch of canna from getting that much larger, because it'll be put more energy going up. So you'll keep it looking good. Your perennial hibiscus, the hibiscus that die back in the winter, they're quick growing plants. So if the beetles come through, or the sawflies, which people often get confused, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, you can cut them back all the way to the ground. Again, water, fertilize if you want to really push them, not too heavily, and boom, they'll pop back up in a matter of weeks and be flowering again, because they're quick growers. Now, not every plant will do that, but the ones that do, you can do that if you don't like it. The hibiscus is going to be just fine. It's going to put on more leaves even if you don't cut it back, but it does look pretty ugly for a while.
Yeah.
So you are spraying again. We're getting back to the spraying. The number one, I got 3 major rules for if you're spraying a pesticide. First one is, and anybody will tell you this, read the label. Read the label. Reading the label is not looking at the front and seeing, hey, it says it'll kill all these kinds of things. And it's not looking at it and saying it'll kill all these kinds of things, and here's how much I need to mix with my gallon of water.
Yeah.
It is really reading the label.
They're usually little booklets on the front of it.
You peel them open and they fold out. And it's not as much reading as it looks. When you fold it out, it is in multiple languages.
For sure.
So it's not the whole thing you have to read.
And a lot of it's information that's there to protect you, not just the pollinators, but to protect you, like all the personal protective equipment that you want. That's there for your health. If you read these labels, you'll discover some interesting things that, like, oh, maybe I do want to wear pants while I'm spraying this particular product. Like,
exactly.
There's good information in there. It is absolutely worth reading.
And you should always follow that stuff. The second rule is read the label. Third rule, read the label. And people don't do this. And follow the label.
Yeah.
If the label says to treat a problem, use 1/2 to 1 ounce per gallon of water, use 1/2. That chemical company wants you to be successful killing your stuff. If you're not successful killing whatever you're trying to kill, you're not going to keep buying their product.
Right.
They do want you to be successful. So if they say 1/2 ounce works, it works. Now, there may be some insects that require it a little bit higher. There may be sometimes when populations are so out of whack that it needs to be a little bit higher, but more is not better. And always go with the low end of that. If that doesn't work, if you read the label, you can probably reapply, and it'll generally tell you how long before you need to reapply. But people do this with all kinds of pesticides, herbicides. They're terrible about it. My mother once told me, who is not a gardener at all, don't know if hopefully she's not on here when I say this. She was trying to get weeds and cracks in the driveway, and she got Roundup and she sprayed it. And this was the original glyphosate, which is not a quick killer. The glyphosate took about 7 days often before you could really see anything, because it interrupted some metabolic processes like photosynthesis, and it had to go through the whole plant. The plant was dead when it was sprayed, but it didn't die. And she got frustrated, so she just poured concentrated Roundup, right on them. And the problem with that is sometimes that will cause the plant to die quickly, but not really die, just the tops. It still has the roots that are alive because it hasn't pulled it down. And so going overboard is more of a problem and less effective.
Yeah.
More is not better.
And the label is like, it's a legal document. Like if you're a business owner and you read the label and you apply this product in exactly the way that it says on the label, and then you damage your crop, even though you did it exactly to the label, then the company that manufactured that chemical is legally culpable. You can sue them for the damages that were caused while you were spraying this according to the label. And like that holds up in court. Like this is a legal document that this is how it is supposed to work. Otherwise, there are repercussions for the company manufacturer.
And that comes back to a homeowner. If you use a chemical off label, is what we say, use it off label, and you damage your neighbor's yard. I'll give you an example. There was a chemical that I was using at another botanic garden one time, and it kills plants that are woody plants that resprout. You put it on, you just, in a little drop thing, you put it on there, and it keeps them from resprouting. Well, we were clearing out some areas, and somebody thought it would be better to just put it in a spray bottle and spray it around.
Sure.
And that product would go in the soil and be taken up by roots of other plants and kill some outright, but we also had a lot of these gnarled looking magnolias and things because of improper use of it. They were using it off label. It was not to be put in a sprayer and sprayed broadcast. So if you did that and you kill your neighbor's plants and they can show that you used a product off label, you can get in some trouble.
You can.
So read that label. On the front side of the label, when we talk about the label, we're really talking about that fold out part. But just remember that something that says natural or organic or whatever does not make it safe.
Correct.
There's a whole lot of stuff out in this world that'll kill you dead that is just as natural as can be. It does not mean it's safe. I had a nephew who was had gotten into, like he was saying, container gardening. Really, he liked the fish with a plant or two, and he was doing them in whiskey barrel, water thing. And they were using a very natural mosquito repellent for themselves, which is permethrin, which kills fish.
Yeah.
And his fish kept dying. He didn't know why. It's because they had this little thing that you put the little tab in, and nobody read about what it was. It just keeps the mosquitoes away. So on your label, read the entire thing, the personal protective equipment. Although I have less issues with that. If you don't want to do that, hey, that's what we call natural selection. That's on you. I'm more concerned about the pollinators. So look, there's a section that says environmental hazards. Environmental hazards. And let me tell you, these companies do not go out of their way to make it easy to see whether this is safe for bees and pollinators or not. So environmental hazards, that'll be a headache. It'll be in bold. There are two things it can say. It can say it is highly toxic to pollinators. Do not use that anywhere around where there might be pollinators. It'll say toxic, which means it's moderately toxic. And then it will not mention pollinators at all. And that means it's only relatively toxic or relatively non-toxic. But those are not about whether or not necessarily about whether the chemical is toxic to bees or pollinators or not. Because going back to the label, if you get a product, say, that is, the label says this is for houseplants. You can spray it to get rid of insects on your pothos and aglaonemas and dieffenbachias. And it doesn't mention bees at all. You don't have pollinators in your house.
No.
If you go out and spray your cucumbers with it, it may kill all the pollinators that visit those cucumbers dead. And the reason is that it is not labeled for the cucumbers, and it's not it could say safe for all houseplants or something like that, where it's very toxic to pollinators, but you don't have pollinators in your house. So it's the label is what plant you can. It'll tell you what plants you can spray it on.
For sure, specifically.
It'll tell you kind of what kind of conditions. There are some that say don't spray while this is flowering. And we'll get to a little bit about that because there's some things you should know about that. But it'll give you it can give you very narrow definition, things in there. And that is all that is legal. Now, that is an issue sometimes when you grow, like we grow 8,000 plants. If we wanted to keep, eradicate all pests, many of our plants are not going to be on the label. And that is illegal to spray this on something off label. So keep that in mind. So when we're talking about poisoning our pollinators, generally we're talking about acute poisoning. There are some things that will, that could chronic problems. Those are much less well studied. Like what does exposure over the course of a season to something mean? So there could be some of the things that are relatively non-toxic that don't mention pollinators on their labels. Those could still be have a chronic toxicity that builds up over time. It's just we don't really necessarily know that.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about acute poisoning, there's kind of three types, or it's usually broken down into three types, and that's direct exposure. You're spraying and there are pollinators out there and you are directly hitting them. Residue that's left on target plants. So the residue you're spraying your hibiscus, and there's residue left on there. That's on the flowers, on the foliage, whatever. And then there's non-target residue, which is like the weeds under your plant, the pollinators may be drifting. You get that with overspraying, not being careful enough. You get it with drift. If it's windy, don't spray. I didn't mention this, but don't spray if it's windy. If you spray and hit water sources, you get that non-target residue that moves around and can cause unintentional damage. So if there is a residual toxicity, and this is a tricky thing because when we're trying to control our pests, we want something that's going to control it for as long as period as possible. We want something that's going to kill those pests dead for, weeks or months. But that's not good for the pollinators.
Right.
If it does have this residual toxicity to pollinators where it will sit on the plant and be toxic over a long time, the label in that environmental hazards section will say, don't use if bees are visiting, or now they've changed it to foraging. So, but you're not seeing that quite yet. Don't use if bees are visiting the treatment area. Okay, visiting the treatment area. Now this is here. If it does not have a residual effect, the label will say, don't use if bees are actively visiting the treatment area. The only difference between those two is the word actively. And if it has the word actively, it is going to be less of a problem, because once it dries on the plant, it's really not a problem. But there you go. And then there are some plants that have extended residual effects or uses. And those are usually systemic chemicals. Those are the ones that get into the plant. So, you put it out, spray it, or sometimes they're granular or liquid. The plant takes it up and they stay in the plant for a while because it's moving through the system. And that means that, the caterpillars that eat on your plants will die over the course of weeks, because it's in there. It's not getting washed off. It takes a while for anything to happen. The extended residual systemic that people are hearing about in the news are the neonics.
Sure.
Which the growers really like, because they can spray once and the plant is basically 1 year, one season crop that they are growing is basically protected until you get it home. It sits in the nursery, it's protected, so it is not getting insect damage for a long time. But they're also bad for pollinators. Not necessarily the most toxic to pollinators. It's just, there's a lot, it lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
It can be used, it's labeled for a lot of crops. And when you get your plant, you don't necessarily know, although there are some efforts to have people either label plants that have been used have neonicotinoids used, or to label ones that have not, that say they have not. The neonics, at least, I don't know about their other extended residual ones. I know the neonics have something on the label that says that it can't be applied during blooming.
Okay.
However, if you use these extended residuals, do not apply it before flowering,
right,
or during flowering.
Yeah.
Only after the petals drop from the flowers. Because if you do it before and then the plant comes into flower, boom. And that's what happens with a lot of these plants coming out of the nursery is they want to get them treated and pristine as they're coming into flower for you at the garden center and looking pretty, and you take home. There is a new regulation for neonics, at least. I don't think it applies to all of these extended residuals, which is what's a problem you get when we start, people are up in arms about this one class of chemicals, but there are other that can do the same thing. But now, at least the neonics, they have to have, there's a little bee icon on the label.
Okay.
So it is something visual, not this very small print that says actively or doesn't say actively visiting the treatment area. So it's that little bee icon. Now, I am not going to give a list of chemicals that are good and that are bad. It's very difficult because most people aren't looking at the active ingredient. That's when you read the label, it'll say, active ingredient. This will be on the front, permethrin 0.5%, non-active ingredients, 99.5%, whatever. Most people are looking at spectracide or, Pest Be Gone or any of those things. And companies will use a name that you are familiar with, but change active ingredients sometimes. So it's not the same active ingredients, even though you're buying Bug Be Gone, they have found something that's an improvement or that's cheaper and still works, or that perhaps is safer, whatever that is, they will, do that. So you can't really go by the brand name. I could give you a list of chemical names, but
Yeah.
they would mean just slightly less to you than they do to me, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Some things, I will go a few things that tend to be safer. There's product usually called BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a little bacteria. Is that right? Yeah,
I think so,
bacteria.
yeah.
That is very, very narrowly focused. Usually there are a couple, but usually what you see is takes care of caterpillars. So, fall web worms, you can do those, but also, if you have vegetable crops or things like that, hornworms or something, it'll take care of that. But they're caterpillars. So if you don't want to kill those monarch caterpillars, got to be careful because that BT will affect all of the caterpillars, Luna moth caterpillars, whatever it is, there's nothing magic that says this kills the bad ones. This leaves the good ones alive when they're that close. Many of the oils that you can use are relatively safe, but not necessarily entirely safe. If you are spraying horticultural oils while bees are active on a tree that's flowering, and you are in effect coating them with oil, and they're going to drop. But there's also some toxicity to it. So even for something like that, not while it's in flower. Insecticidal soaps tend to be good. There's another contact one, like many of these are. So as long as you're not doing it while the bees are active, you're in pretty good shape. I don't want to get too deep into like the formulations, because most homeowners, it's either a liquid or it's a powder that you mix with a liquid, or it can be just a powder. The one thing to keep in mind is that on the list of safe to unsafe, powders are the worst. Fine powders are the worst, because a bee is specifically designed to pick up little particles, the pollen, and it will pick up those powders just like it will pollen, and then it brings it back to the hive.
Sure.
So it is not, it's not just affecting that bee, it's affecting the entire health of the colony. So you have to feel careful. You have to be very careful about that. In general, look for chemicals that have a very narrow focus. When you get, the spectra side, which by definition of the name, side, it means to kill, and spectra, it's a wide spectrum of things. We love that because we have one chemical in our shed, we can go out and kill all the things, but that's more likely to injure more pollinators because it's a wide spectrum. It's not drawing a line. There are some products for, say, that treat beetles a little bit better or things like that. So again, those are better to use, but not while it's flowering, because if it's killing one thing, there's a good chance it's killing something else. We have questions?
Yeah, there were a handful of questions, for sure. So when you were talking about watering earlier, talked about watering deep and infrequently, Claudia was wondering, what if you have sandy soil where water just runs down and through?
You have sandy soil, something I've never had the opportunity to have. You may have to water more often and maybe not quite as deep, but you still want water to really infiltrate. Yeah, you still may need to, but also, right plant, right place.
For sure.
You may not be able to grow all the same plants that I grow in heavy soil, and I certainly can't grow all the same plants you can grow in sand in my heavy soil.
Yeah.
Not without us both amending our soils to get closer to the middle.
Yeah, and just be aware of the fact that you have sandy soil, and when you apply water, that it is going to run down and through. You are watering it deep, and it is going to drain quite well. Maybe that just means you need to do it a bit more frequently than you would in a heavier soil.
Thank you. Yeah, you're
be aware of what you have.
And but also be aware that if you spray, you are moving that water into the water system more easily because it will move through the soil, whereas soil is pretty good about binding things, slowing water, keeping it out of water systems a little bit better than in sandier soils.
Yeah, we can keep the next question sort of in that vein. Ron Johnny was asking, if your home uses well water, can you use Roundup to control weeds, or will it contaminate the water?
So theoretically, Roundup is very, very inactive once it hits the soil, hits the plant. So as long as you are not spraying it before rain or around water that runs to you, you should be okay spraying Roundup around your garden. I'm telling you what the experts say. I don't know that for sure. Yeah. I have a stream at the bottom of my property, and I'm very aware of what I put out going toward that stream, and I do use Roundup. I don't have concerns about it moving into that stream, but Roundup will say that it dries in 4 hours, so as long as you put it on 4 hours before it rains, it's okay. I don't do that. I don't do it if I see rain in the next generally 24 hours. But
for sure. And the label will probably give you some useful information that will help you make a good decision yourself. Like it might say, don't spray it within however many feet of a water source. And if it's saying that, well, you could probably assume, it's going to travel with water and get into water.
Right.
So again, if you read the label and follow the label, and you should have minimal issues.
And the drug, what kind of drugs you get addicted to spraying stuff.
You do.
The chemical companies will err on the side of safety as the science shows it. If they say don't spray within 50 feet of a well, you should be safe doing that, at least acutely. All these things really test acute things, not chronic, or there's much less research on chronic effects. If you're not spraying within that 50 feet, and you go and test, and there's the chemical in your water source, and you've never sprayed it that close, you're going to be able to go, you and your lawyer are going to be able to go have a talk with them. They don't want that to happen. So while it'd be nice if it was all out of the goodness of their heart, it's out of the goodness of our tort system that they don't.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Carol was wondering if you could talk about what spraying does to pollinators when it's companies like Mosquito Joe coming in and just, nuking the thing. Like what?
Don't do that. Don't spray that stuff. Yeah, I know. My neighbor too. Not now, my former neighbor. Look, if something's being sprayed indiscriminately around, it's killing all kinds of things. Funny thing that seems to me is a lot of the people I see spraying that stuff never go out in their yards at all. So why are they spraying?
Right.
I would encourage anybody to not use one of those services. It's just, anything that you're just spraying in a cloud. Mosquitoes are insects. If you're killing one insect, there's a good chance you're killing another. That's the bottom line. Now, we'll say you get those mosquito dunks, the little donut things that you can put into a water thing, and those are completely safe. They kill mosquito larvae and nothing else, not even dragonfly nymphs. They are safe to use.
We had another question came in. Someone was asking specifically what are safe things we can do for mosquitoes. And that's something that actually Brie Arthur recommends. Brie Arthur recommends growing rice as an ornamental in a container, because you won't have a drainage hole in the bottom of that rice container, because that's just how rice grows. And you will have standing water in your rice, and that does attract mosquitoes. Well, put the mosquito dunk in your rice container, and then they'll lay their eggs in that rice, and then it'll kill just the mosquitoes in there, and then boom, no mosquitoes.
Yeah, perfectly safe for you. It's a
and a beautiful ornamental rice planter to boot. So
that's right. Make sure that on the same token, don't make sure there is not standing water on your property, still watery, especially shallow. That helps. If you do have a pond and you don't want to use mosquito dunks, you don't have moving water in there, then at the very least get some dye, get Black Lagoon dye and put it in there and turn the water black. That can help. Doesn't fix it, but it helps. If you have your garden so that there's some air movement through there, that helps. I know in my garden, I go from my front lawn down into my woodland, down to kind of the lower part of my woodland. The mosquitoes get worse all the way down there. But yeah, I don't know exactly what chemicals Mosquito Joe and those others are using.
Sure.
So I can't speak about the specific chemical.
Yeah.
But in general,
And one thing I'll say, like, it's not a good idea to come in and wholesale try to like you said, try to eradicate everything in one go like that, because all that does is that opens up a hole in the ecosystem. Before you had an unbalanced ecosystem and then you come in and decimate it, well, there's now that same vacuum, that same, like, you're just going to attract maybe even new and worse pests, honestly. So
right.
It's not the wisest of courses to just come in and indiscriminately destroy like that.
And mosquito, I always tell people that, people have problems with all kinds of pests. The biggest garden pest in my mind, for me, are mosquitoes. Those are the ones that'll drive me inside. I can live with stuff eating my plants. And the mosquitoes are the worst. But that I try to protect myself.
Yeah.
Beautyberry. Here's my beautyberry, Native American beautyberry, not Asian beautyberry. The leaves of that, for me and for other people I've talked to, work great for keeping mosquitoes off. On me, it works as well as any kind of deep woods off, anything like that. I just take a handful of leaves, rub them around on my arms, rub them on my face, on my neck, my ears, on the brim of my hat. And it works great for me. Doesn't work as well for my wife for whatever reason. But I have beautyberries planted in multiple areas. They're beautiful plants, but I really have them. So I just break off leaf tips. I kind of keep them compact by doing that. Just break off the branch tips and just rub them around on me.
Nice.
And works.
I bet.
Your neighbor who sprayed doing Mosquito Joe isn't going to believe you, but.
No kidding. Okay, so we got a question from Barbara. She says, not pollinators, but definitely affecting flowering. She says slugs and snails are eating everything. She says she's tried beer traps, but it's not been working because of the amount of rain. What are things we can do to manage slugs and snails while also protecting pollinators?
So diatomaceous earth is it's basically the little diatoms, the dried up little shells of little ocean critters that are all sharp or whatever. They don't hurt you because they're so tiny, but you can sprinkle that on top of soil, and that the slugs and snails, they're too small for you to feel, but they're plenty big enough for a slug going over it. They don't like that. Be careful with that, because actually diatomaceous earth can be harmful to pollinators if and used in the wrong way. Something else that's often used is kaolin clay, the really fine clay, but that's like a dust, and that'll stick to the bees, and it isn't so much of an issue with bringing the chemical back, but it stays on them and it prevents pollen from sticking to them. Other than that, you can go out and pick them off by hand at night. A little salt thing in the evening.
For sure.
And
it might be cultural things too. Like if you're getting slugs and snails on plants that you're irrigating every single week, maybe you don't need to irrigate them as much as you think you do, and you're just creating that environment.
And look, they like to be under things during the day. So if you have pile of some old pavers that are sitting there on the soil, but you're not really doing anything with. You flip those over during the day, there's probably some slugs under there. Old plant saucers that you're not using or whatever. So look for those kinds of things, and you can move them and either pick up the slugs or a little salt on them. I guess that works. It's in all the cartoons. I've never actually done it.
And cartoons are where we go for all of the things we need in life. So there it is. Okay. We got one more question. Somebody says that the invasive spotted lanternfly, known for relying on the tree of heaven, Ailanthus altissima, they want to know what is the safest, most effective way to kill the host.
To kill Ailanthus?
Yeah, for sure.
Cut it down and put some kind of stump killer. Just paint that on there.
For sure. And if it's a baby, well, you can rip it out with your hands. And yeah, definitely. And I would like to point out that like the way this question is phrased is not necessarily like the correct way. Like the thing about Ailanthus altissima, like yes, it is invasive, but that is again another unbalance in the ecosystem. And then you're coming in and saying, I want to eradicate this thing. And again, like, yes, it's not great that it's unbalanced, but it's diversity is important.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm trying to get at here.
If that was the major food source for the spotted lanternfly, we probably wouldn't mind the spotted lanternfly so much if it was just eating Ailanthus, but the problem is it's not. It's killing a lot of other things.
Sure.
There's some really interesting studies done, and I wish I could give you, I could cite this for you, but where, it's shown that the weeds in urban areas, which Ailanthus and Paulownia, the princess tree, and other non-native weeds make up about 80% of the diet of the insects in the city, the pollinators. And we actually, in some areas, the level of pollinators, native pollinators in these urban areas is about on par with some natural areas if there is kind of overgrown weedy areas that
And that actually makes a lot of sense because you walk around a city and you see people's reluctance to spend money on a landscape. And what do? You let it go wild to the invasive species. And those are the flowering plants that the pollinators have access to, which is
or if it's all concrete and tree of heaven grows up through cracks in the sidewalk or other weeds, that may be the only plant that's there, and it won't feed all pollinators.
Have you seen the pollinators go to tree of heaven? Like, they love that thing. It's really upsetting how much pollinators love tree of heaven.
One of the hard things is we get, where I always try and talk about is one, diversity, and two, looking at environmental pluses and negatives. And where are the pluses, where are the negatives? And sometimes those weeds in a city have more pluses than they do negatives.
And like their resilience, even like the urban sites, it's a tough spot for a lot of plants. Whereas these really weedy, really aggressive, really invasive things, like it may be that they're the only thing that does thrive there.
And many of those things are plants whose life cycle is built around producing a ton of seeds, dispersing them, and hoping some fall somewhere where they'll germinate. They need sun because when they fall into one of those areas where they'll germinate, they have to grow fast in sun. And this is the whole thing, a tree falling in the woods and everything grows up like that. Tree of heaven won't go into native woodlands, for instance. It can't grow in sun. So while it is a problem, and I'm not discounting the spotted lanternfly at all. Plants like tree of heaven and princess tree, they're very visible. They're what people see because they're growing in cracks and they're growing on the sides of the roads, but they don't move into natural environments. And so we should worry more about the ones that do grow in natural ecosystems.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. Like, this topic is complicated. Like, there's so many moving parts. It's all interconnected. One thing affects another, and it's just, there's so much to it. And I think the main takeaway from this is learn as much as you can, try to understand as much as you can. Don't just poo-poo things as this is bad and this is good. Like, actually try to understand these things and understand where they can be useful, how they can be used for the benefit of the greater ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And the spotted lanternfly, these things go in a couple directions. Sometimes they are really awful and kill a lot of things. the majority of things. Sometimes they wind up having population spikes and then go down. Where you have great diversity, you have fewer of these problems.
Yes.
Crepe myrtle bark scale is going to be a huge issue in the southeast because we have way too many crepe myrtles planted.
For sure.
Spotted lanternfly may go one way, may go other. Usually insects are not the worst problem. Dutch elm disease moved by borers, but it's the fungus that kills the trees. But there are others, emerald ash borer and some moths that are hitting pines and things like that. So.
And you touched on something that I think is worth mentioning. Sometimes problems in the garden sort themselves out. There's a Pinus thunbergii, Japanese black pine, on our berms. I noticed that it had a bunch of caterpillars in it that were eating the needles. And I watched them do it for a week and some change. I was fully expecting this thing to be completely defoliated, but within a week or so, the caterpillars were gone. They moved on with their life. Yeah, there's a chunk of it that's a little bit bald, but honestly, you just prune in one spot, the thing looks like a perfectly good tree. The problem sorted itself out naturally. There was no need for anybody to go out there and immediately start spraying. Like sometimes the problems do resolve themselves. Sometimes you do have the birds come in and snatch up, like maybe you do have the balance in that ecosystem. You just don't necessarily have the patience in this moment to like see how it is there and that it will kind of fix itself. So sometimes it's okay and you don't need to go rushing to control things. Sometimes nature is well in control of itself and doing just fine without you. Thank you very much.
That's right. And if they had continued to eat that and it had been a problem, we would have and put something else in. We never would have treated it.
Yeah, there are other pines out on the berms that did not get eaten by caterpillars, and hey, we're out here learning. So that's really great.
Yep.
Cool. Well, that is all that. I mean, we're at negative time. We went well over time today, which is fine. It's an important conversation. So I'm glad we were able to discuss this. So thank you so much for pulling this together, Mark, and sharing some of this information with us.
And I sent this to you. If I don't know,
I
put it in the chat.
Yeah.
There's some great information from NC State on this. There's a lot of great information on the web from a lot of different extension agents using research-based material. NC State has a great apiculture facility, and in fact, some of what I talked about came from a person who used to work there who now has a bee company specifically about spraying safely. And this is somebody who has a vested business interest in you not killing bees. And, she understands that you can spray. So go out there. If you're not in North Carolina, those of you who are joining us, go to your state extension or a nearby state's land grant university extension program, and they probably have some information on this.
Wonderful. Awesome. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Midweek Program. We will be back next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Mark and Evan will be talking about variegation, which should be absolutely fascinating. We will see you all next time. Y'all take care.